At 74, I'd learned that nothing good ever happens at 3 in the morning. What I didn't know was that my son-in-law wasn't calling to save my daughter. He was calling to steal everything I'd spent 50 years building. The phone's shrill ring cut through the darkness of my Calgary bedroom like a knife. I fumbled for it, heart already racing with the kind of dread that comes from decades of emergency calls, first as a paramedic, then as a father. "Walter? Thank God you answered." Evan's voice was tight, panicked. "There's been an accident. Claire's in the hospital." I sat up instantly. Claire was my only daughter, 38 years old, married to Evan for 6 years. They lived in Vancouver, where she worked as a nurse practitioner. "What happened? Is she okay?" She's unconscious, Walter. They're saying brain injury. The doctors need immediate authorization for surgery, but there's a problem with her insurance. I need you to transfer money right away. They want $200,000 as a deposit before they'll operate." My blood ran cold. Brain surgery? My little girl who used to climb onto my lap to read stories. Which hospital? Vancouver General. But Walter, listen to me carefully. Time is critical. Every minute we delay increases the risk of permanent damage. I need you to wire the money to the hospital's emergency fund account. I have the routing information right here. Something felt wrong. In my 25 years as a paramedic, I'd never heard of a hospital demanding upfront payment for emergency brain surgery. But fear for Claire was overriding my skepticism. "Evan, let me talk to a doctor. There's no time. The neurosurgeon is scrubbing in now. If we don't get this deposit, they'll have to transfer her to a public hospital, and by then, it could be too late. Please, Walter, I'm begging you. Save my wife." I found myself reaching for my laptop, Evan's desperation echoing in my ears. But something made me pause. "Give me the, account information. I'll handle this." Walter, you're a lifesaver. The account is... Email it to me. I need to see everything in writing for the bank. I don't have time to... Evan, my paramedic training kicked in. Stay calm. Follow protocol. Email me the hospital information, the doctor's name, and the account details. I'll transfer the money as soon as I verify everything. There was a pause. When Evan spoke again, his voice had changed slightly. Less panicked, more calculating. "Of course. I'll send everything right now, but please hurry, Walter. Claire's life depends on it." The line went dead. I sat in my dark bedroom, laptop glowing, staring at Evan's email. Everything looked official. Hospital letterhead, doctor's credentials, urgent payment instructions. But 50 years of emergency response had taught me to verify first, act second. I called Vancouver General Hospital. "Emergency department, this is Nurse Rodriguez. I'm calling about my daughter, Claire. Hargreaves. She was brought in tonight with a brain injury? One moment, please." The pause felt eternal. "Sir, I don't show any patient by that name in our system tonight." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure?" "Claire Lockwood, 38, brown hair." "I'm certain, sir. We've had no brain injury admissions tonight. Is it possible she was taken to a different hospital?" I hung up and immediately called the other major Vancouver hospitals. VGH, St. Paul's, Lionsgate. None had Claire as a patient. Evan had lied. But why? What kind of emergency could require a fake brain injury story? Unless... I called Claire's cell phone. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My hands were shaking as I dialed Evan's number. "Walter, did you send the wire? The doctors are asking." "Evan, I just called Vancouver General. Claire isn't there." Silence. "Evan? Walter, you must have called the wrong department. She's in the neurological ICU. They probably don't have updated records." I called 4 hospitals. She's not in any of them. Another pause. Longer this time. "Look, Walter, I know this is confusing, but where's my daughter?" She's at a private clinic. I didn't want to worry you with all the details, but I hung up and called Claire again. This time, she answered on the second ring. "Dad, what's wrong? It's 3:30 in the morning." She sounded perfectly fine. Alert, concerned, but definitely not unconscious, with a brain injury. "Claire, where are you right now?" "I'm in bed. Evan's not here. He said he had some late work emergency." "Dad, you're scaring me." "Honey, I need you to listen carefully. Evan just called me saying you were in a coma and needed emergency brain surgery." "What? That's insane. I'm fine. I've been sleeping." He wanted me to wire $200,000 to a hospital account. $200,000. "Dad, we don't have that kind of money. Neither do you." "Do you?" I never told Claire about my full financial situation. After selling my medical transport company 3 years ago, plus decades of careful investing, I was worth considerably more than she knew. That's not important right now. What is important is that your husband just tried to scam me out of a lot of money using a fake emergency. There has to be some explanation. Claire, I called every hospital in Vancouver. You're not in any of them. Evan lied. I could hear her breathing change, the way it used to when she was little and trying not to cry. Dad, what do I do? First, don't let Evan know we've talked. Second, act normal when he gets home. Third, we need to figure out what's really going on. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, Paul Whitaker, and my lawyer, Allison Fairmont. I'd known both of them for over a decade, and I trusted them completely. Paul, I need you to do something unusual. I want you to freeze my accounts temporarily. No transfers over $10,000 without verbal authorization from me, confirmed by you calling me back on my home number. Walter, what's going on? I think someone's trying to defraud me. Family member. Paul's voice became serious. How much access does this person have to your financial information? I'm not sure, but they knew enough to ask for exactly the kind of amount that would require significant liquid assets. I'll implement the freeze immediately. Walter, you should also consider changing your account passwords and security questions. Already done. My next call was to Allison. I need you to investigate someone for me. Evan Lockwood, married to my daughter Claire, lives in Vancouver, claims to work in software consulting. What kind of investigation? Background check, credit history, criminal record, employment verification, everything you can legally obtain. Walter, this is about family? He tried to scam me last night. Used a fake emergency involving my daughter to get me to wire $200,000. Jesus, how sophisticated was the attempt? Very. Hospital letterhead, doctor credentials, urgent medical situation. If I hadn't verified first, I might have fallen for it. I'll have preliminary information by tomorrow, full report by the end of the week. That afternoon, Claire called. Dad, I confronted Evan about last night. He said it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd been confused and panicked about something at work, and somehow got mixed up about a medical situation. Do you believe him? I don't know. He seemed genuinely sorry, but the story doesn't make sense. How do you get confused about your wife being in a coma? What did he say when you asked him? About that specifically? He said he'd been under a lot of stress lately. Work pressure, financial concerns. He apologized and promised it would never happen again. Financial concerns? That's what I asked. He said business has been slow, but nothing we can't handle. I made a mental note to have Allison dig deeper into Evan's financial situation. Claire, I need you to do something for me. Can you quietly check your joint bank accounts? See if there are any unusual transactions or changes? Dad, I don't want to spy on my husband. He tried to steal $200,000 from me using a fake emergency about you. This isn't about trust anymore. This is about protection. She was quiet for a long moment. I'll check tonight when he's asleep. Allison called me Tuesday evening with preliminary findings. Walter, your son-in-law is in serious financial trouble. How serious? Credit cards maxed out, behind on mortgage payments, owes money to multiple creditors. His consulting business appears to be largely non-existent. I can't find evidence of regular client work or income. What about criminal history? Clean record, but I found something interesting. He's been researching inheritance law and elder financial planning quite extensively online. Browser history shows multiple searches about power of attorney, estate transfers, and something called grandparent scams. My blood ran cold. Grandparent scams? Fraud schemes targeting elderly people. Usually involves fake emergencies requiring immediate money transfers. Sound familiar? He's been planning this. It gets worse. I found evidence he's been in contact with other family members of wealthy seniors. Looks like he might be running multiple scams simultaneously. My daughter's married to a professional con artist. I'm afraid so. Walter, there's something else. I found mortgage documents showing he's been forging Claire's signature on loan applications. She might not even know how much debt they're actually in. Can you prove the forgery? I'd need handwriting analysis, but the signatures are clearly different from her known samples. This man is systematically defrauding multiple people, including his own wife. What do I do? Gather evidence, document everything. And we need to protect Claire, both financially and physically. When cornered, people like Evan can become unpredictable. That night, Claire called me crying. Dad, I checked our accounts. There's almost nothing left. The mortgage is 3 months behind. We have over $80,000 in credit card debt I didn't know about. And there are loan applications with my signature that I never signed. Where's Evan? He's not home yet. Dad, I'm scared. What if he comes home and realizes I know? Pack a bag. Drive to a hotel. Don't tell Evan where you're going. I can't just leave my husband. Claire, he's been forging your signature and running scams on elderly people. He's not the man you married. He's a criminal. How do you know all this? I hired an investigator. Evan tried to steal from me, and it turns out I'm not his first victim. I could hear her crying harder. Dad, what do I do? How did I not see this? You saw what he wanted you to see. These people are professional manipulators. Can you get to a hotel safely? I think so. He's usually not home before midnight lately. Go now. Call me when you're checked in. Evan called me at 2 a.m. Thursday morning. His voice was different this time, angry, desperate. Walter, we need to talk. About what? About Claire. She's missing. I think she might have had some kind of breakdown. She's been acting strange lately, paranoid, talking about money problems that don't exist. Where do you think she went? I don't know, but I'm worried about her mental state. She's been making wild accusations about our finances, claiming I forged documents. It's like she's having some kind of psychotic episode. I almost admired his audacity. Even caught red-handed, he was trying to manipulate the situation. That sounds serious. Have you contacted the police? I was hoping to keep this in the family. You know how these things can affect someone's career, especially in healthcare. Of course. Walter, I hate to ask this, but I'm worried Claire might try to hurt herself. If I could hire a private investigator to find her quickly, maybe get her the help she needs. But money's tight right now. Could you possibly help you financially? Just a loan, maybe $50,000, enough to hire professionals, get Claire proper psychiatric care. Even now, he was trying to scam me. Evan, I talked to Claire last night. She's fine, she's safe, and she's not having a psychotic episode. Silence. Evan, Walter, I think you're confused. Claire is missing and she's safe because I told her to leave after we discovered you've been forging her signature and running elder fraud scams. The silence stretched longer this time. When Evan spoke again, his voice had changed completely. No more fake concern, no more manipulation, just cold calculation. Prove it. I don't have to prove anything to you. I'm not your victim. You're a lonely old widower with too much money and not enough sense. Claire married beneath her station, and I've been nothing but patient with your family's dysfunction. Is that your real voice, Evan? No more. Pretending to care? Here's what's going to happen, Walter. Claire's going to come home. We're going to work out our marital problems privately, and you're going to stay out of our business. If you try to interfere, I'll make sure Claire knows exactly what kind of paranoid, controlling father she really has. And if I don't, I know where you live. I know your routines. I know you're alone in that big house with all that money. Accidents happen to elderly people all the time. He'd just threatened me, and I'd recorded every word. Friday morning, I met with Allison and Detective Emily Crow from the Calgary Police Financial Crimes Unit. Allison had worked with her before on elder fraud cases. Mr. Hargreaves, this is an impressive amount of evidence, Detective Crow said, reviewing Allison's investigation file. Forged signatures, identity theft, elder fraud attempts, and now threats. We can definitely pursue criminal charges. What about my daughter? She's still legally married to him. That actually works in our favor. Spousal fraud is taken very seriously, especially when it involves forged documents. The threat against you pushes this into potential assault charges. Allison leaned forward. Detective, what's our timeline here? Evan is clearly escalating. We can move quickly. I'll coordinate with Vancouver PD to arrest him today. Mr. Hargreaves, I need you to be careful until he's in custody. Men like this can become dangerous when they realize they're caught. What about other victims? We'll investigate that too. If he's been running multiple scams, we'll find the other victims and help them recover what we can. That afternoon, Claire called from her hotel. Dad, Evan's been calling and texting nonstop. He's saying you've poisoned my mind against him, that you've hired people to investigate him illegally. Has he threatened you? Not directly, but his messages are getting stranger, more desperate. Claire, the police are going to arrest him today. Are you somewhere safe? I'm registered under a false name at a hotel downtown Vancouver, but Dad, I'm scared. What if he finds me? He won't. Detective Crow is coordinating with Vancouver PD. They're moving now. At 6 p.m., Detective Crow called. We got him. Evan Lockwood is in custody on charges of fraud, forgery, identity theft, and making threats. Vancouver PD found evidence at his residence suggesting at least 6 other ongoing scams. What happens now? He'll be held pending bail hearing. Given the flight risk and multiple victims, bail will likely be substantial. Your daughter should be safe now. Over the weekend, the full scope of Evan's operation became clear. He hadn't just targeted me. He'd been running elaborate scams on elderly people across Western Canada for over 2 years. The emergency medical transfer scam was just one of several schemes. He'd also posed as investment advisors, charity representatives, and even government officials collecting processing fees for benefit payments. Claire came home to Calgary Sunday evening. She looked exhausted, devastated, but relieved. "Dad, I keep thinking about signs I missed. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd get angry when I asked about money. Professional con artists are experts at deception. It's not your fault. But I lived with him. How did I not see it? Because you loved him and trusted him. That's not a weakness, Claire. That's what normal people do." We sat in my kitchen, the same one where I'd taught her to make pancakes 25 years ago. "What happens to our house? Our debts?" "Allison is handling the financial cleanup. Since Evan forged your signatures, you're not legally responsible for most of the debt. The house might be more complicated, but we'll figure it out. I don't want to take money from you. You're not taking anything. You're my daughter and I'm helping you rebuild. That's what fathers do." She started crying, not the panicked tears from the hotel, but the deep exhausted sobs of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight. "I'm so sorry, Dad, for bringing him into our family, for not seeing what he was. Claire, listen to me carefully. Evan's crimes are not your fault. His choices are not your responsibility. You are the victim here, not the villain." Evan's trial began 6 months later. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case, dozens of victims, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent transactions, recorded threats, and evidence of systematic identity theft. I testified about the 3 a.m. call, the fake hospital emergency, and Evan's subsequent threats. Claire testified about the forged signatures and financial deception within their marriage. But the most powerful testimony came from Helen Ashcroft, an 81-year-old widow from Edmonton who'd lost her entire life savings to one of Evan's investment scams. "He seemed so genuine," she told the court. "He called me grandma, talked about his own grandmother, made me feel like family. I trusted him with everything I had." Evan's defense attorney tried to paint him as a desperate man under financial pressure who'd made poor choices but wasn't a hardened criminal. The jury didn't buy it. They convicted him on 14 counts of fraud, 6 counts of forgery, 2 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of making threats. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. "Mr. Lockwood," the judge said during sentencing, "you systematically targeted vulnerable elderly people, betrayed the trust of your own wife, and showed no remorse for the devastation you caused. You are a predator, and society needs protection from you." A year later, Claire had rebuilt her life. She'd moved back to Calgary, found work at Alberta Children's Hospital, and was slowly learning to trust her instincts again. "Dad, I got a letter from Evan yesterday," she told me over Sunday dinner. "What did he want?" "Forgiveness. He claims he's found religion in prison, that he wants to make amends. How do you feel about that?" "Angry. He destroyed my life, stole from elderly people, threatened my father, and now he wants me to forgive him so he can feel better about himself." That sounds like a healthy perspective. I threw the letter away. We finished eating in comfortable silence. Claire had insisted on cooking. She said it helped her feel normal again. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you check that night? Most people would have just sent the money immediately if they thought their daughter was dying. 50 years of emergency medicine taught me to verify first, act second. But honestly, something about his voice felt wrong, too rehearsed, too much like he was reading from a script. You saved us both that night. I saved myself. You saved yourself by being brave enough to leave when you realized the truth." 2 years after Evan's arrest, I got a call from Detective Crow. "Walter, we've identified 43 victims of Evan's various schemes. Thanks to your recording and the evidence Allison gathered, we recovered almost $800,000 in stolen funds. What about the people who lost everything? Some got their money back. Others, well, Helen Ashcroft died last month, cancer. She never recovered financially, but at least she saw Evan convicted." After hanging up, I sat in my study thinking about that 3 a.m. call, how close I'd come to being another victim, how many other families Evan had destroyed. Claire stopped by that evening with groceries. You know what the strangest part is? She said while unpacking milk and bread. What? I'm grateful it happened. Grateful? Not for the pain or the betrayal, but for learning who I really am when everything falls apart, for discovering I'm stronger than I thought, and for remembering what real family love looks like. She hugged me then, the way she used to when she was little and needed comfort. Dad, you always said trust but verify. I never understood what that meant until Evan. And now? Now I know the difference between healthy skepticism and paranoid suspicion, between protecting yourself and closing your heart. That's wisdom worth having. It cost enough to learn. Later that night, alone in my house, I thought about Evan's threats, how he'd said accidents happen to elderly people all time. He wasn't wrong. They do. But they also happen to people who underestimate the elderly. Evan had seen a lonely widower with too much money and not enough sense. He'd been half right. I did have too much money, but I'd never been foolish enough to trust without verifying. The 3 a.m. call that was supposed to be his perfect crime became the evidence that destroyed him. Sometimes the best defense against predators is simply remembering that when something sounds too urgent to verify, that's exactly when verification matters most. My grandson visits now sometimes, Claire's sister's boy. He's 16 and thinks he knows everything. Last week he asked me why old people fall for scams so easily. Because, I told him, predators are experts at creating artificial urgency. They make you feel like there's no time to think, only time to react. The moment someone tells you there's no time to verify, that's exactly when you need to slow down and verify anyway. But what if it's a real emergency? Real emergencies still exist when you take 30 seconds to verify them. Fake emergencies disappear the moment you start asking questions. That's the lesson Evan taught me, at the cost of 8 years of his freedom and the trust of everyone who'd ever loved him. When someone calls at 3 a.m. demanding immediate action, the most important thing you can do is check first.